So it looks like we've stabilized in terms of our numbers. And so welcome to group one. I'm excited to introduce Cassandra from Oregon, who has done some significant work on their coordinated application eligibility and enrollment system in her state. So Cass, I'll turn it to you. Remind me if you need me to share your slides or if you're wanting to share those.
I can share my slides, I believe. We'll see how this goes. It looks like you can see them, I hope, right?
Yes, excuse me, yes, they're not in presentation format, but we can see.
I'm heading that way right now.
Perfect.
All right, there we go.
All set.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cassandra Ferder. I'm with the Department of Early Learning and Care. For most of this PDG grant, we've been the Early Learning Division. And so I'll kind of touch base a little bit on that exciting news. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I'm actually here just to kind of talk a little bit about the really beginnings of like how this started, what we're doing, and kind of maybe a little bit about where we're heading. So with that, I will get going. Thanks again. So way back when, I'm drawing a blank for the date and I'm really sorry. I meant to put it on here. And now that it's not here, I'm just like, dang it. Anyway, the early learning hubs, when coordinated enrollment first was a concept, I think it would be fair to say it was more helping hubs take on this work, working with childcare resource and referrals and working with their other partners to kind of coordinate eligibility and kind of streamline that. And so, and through the regional sector planning, kind of being able to map early childhood priorities based on the 36 counties that Oregon has. For anyone not on this call, we have 16 early learning hubs, and that covers 36 counties in our state. We have close to around 300,000 kids that are entering child care or preschool in the early learning environment and on their education pathway. I'm stumbling today. Apologize for that. Anyway, knowing that that was a pilot that we just began, PDG fund came, and Oregon was awarded a grant. And through that grant, one of the projects was to create a coordinated enrollment implementation plan. So in the slides I have created, you'll see that this blue highlight is there. And after the webinar is over, these resources will be shared and you'll be able to see that implementation plan. In there, it outlined resources, it outlined kind of templates and tools in terms of what would be an ideal plan to implement this across the state. So that said, COVID came and this plan was delivered and then things were shut down. And so with that, fast forward to where we are today, we're really having this great opportunity because in the meantime, the Early Learning Division worked incredibly hard with community partners, legislators, our governor, and others to create the Department of Early Learning and Care, which is very exciting to the rest of us. As you know, anybody that's entered that space of becoming an agency, it is an incredible lift. In that lift, we also worked with our Department of Human Resources or Human Services agency to migrate the early or the employment related daycare, which is we call the ERDC program, which helps provide sufficient funds for families to be able to get assistance with childcare so they can go to work and stay at work. So we brought that in as part of our new agency. And that will also allow us thinking about like wait lists, how we coordinate that childcare wait list, how we coordinate those fundings, and then hopefully talking about other touch points for coordination, right? For eligibility, for resources, for rollover, for connections to other programs, all of the warm handoff things that we want in that perfect world. So that was one huge win for Oregon. So basically, moving on, Delk is looking at this as really a system building strategy. We have multiple strategies. We have a brand new Raise Up Oregon strategic plan that just got approved last week by our Early Learning Council. And through that, through coordinated enrollment, we believe that the state of Oregon and local communities will continue to build on that vision that is outlined in Raise Up Oregon. And we'll continue to use our regional planning and to ensure that the vision is informed and shared by all the communities and stakeholders, including families. Part of where we talk about the families, the preschool development grant also afforded us an opportunity to create some tools to really think about parent voice, where it shows up, how it's used. And in this space, in our evaluation that you'll also hear about a little bit, parent voice was definitely heard and shared, and you'll see it throughout that evaluation report. As I just mentioned, we had a strategic plan, Raise Up Oregon. We're now calling this Raise Up Oregon 2.0. One of the major wins for Oregon is this strategic plan, where we understand that it isn't just one agency that does this work. It's really reaching out to other partners, other agencies, understanding where those parallel intersections occur, and really lifting that work up. And for instance, in the Raise Up Oregon work, there is 6 agencies, including DELC, that coordinate this work right now, that are really looking at that education pathway, just from the prenatal all the way through 20 system, and looking for ways to make that a smoother pathway for families. And coordinating those efforts, including, I think the biggest exciting one is the coordination with housing, thinking about, it's hard to think about quality care, quality preschool, all those things if you're homeless or if you're struggling to find a place to live. So really, Oregon being very intentional about this strategic plan, being out in the community, having multiple listening sessions all around the state, determining, what really are those access points. The win with ERDC coming over, being able to really be that opportunity where we are a regulatory childcare licensing agency as well. So bringing those in together and seeing how they work in a more aligned way will be really exciting. Things to stay tuned and watch Oregon get through. So thank you for that. In addition to being at one of our strategic goals, we also view it as very collaborative focused. It's a strategy that we recognize that there isn't one single entity that can do all this over the landscape of our state, including financing, quality care, training, lifting professionals up in this work. All of those things that everybody in this work deals with, right? So in order to successfully implement this system, we have to consistently be collaborating with our publicly funded programs, and also be working out with our partners, finding out where those, how people are using coordinating, and I'm sorry, not using, but how they're coordinating referrals. Thinking about home visiting, thinking about, in Oregon, we have a fairly new program called Baby Promise, where we're helping families identify that care in that infant stage, thinking about the linkages between, wouldn't it be dreamy if you go straight from infant care to preschool and it's just a smooth little ride? As a mom, I think that would just be, what every mom or what every parent would want, definitely, or grandma or care provider. So that's kind of when we think about the collaboration, constantly reaching out. I meet with our partners internally. I just mentioned Baby Promise, but also OPK, which is our Oregon Pre-Kindergarten. We have Head Start. We have Preschool Promise. Thinking about our professional learning team, where those intersections are. I have the awesome opportunity to also work with an organization called the Oregon Parenting Education Collaborative, and thinking about what those parent educational needs are to lift this work up for awareness, understanding that some of these publicly funded programs that maybe were not accessible to families in the past, where we're opening doors and creating more opportunity in these spaces. And then but helping share that information and really getting that out to the families that would most benefit, and also ones that maybe regionally didn't think that this was for them. A lot of times programs are generated or created, and people will get the glossy flyer. They will get the whiz bang little toy or gadget that says, "Oh, do this," and maybe somebody, especially where English is not their first language, really can't see themselves in that or understand that and accept that they mean them too. So really kind of reaching into that family voice to identify what are those access points that makes a particular family feel welcome. I think that's really part of this collaboration when we talk is, what does that look like across the landscape? Oregon looks, we were on the call earlier, a few minutes before this started, and talking about trees. And if you think about the different species of trees in the different states, well, that's also people. And if you think about that across our state, we have desert, we have coast, we have mountains, we have a valley, we have farming, agricultural space. All of those entities help us make us Oregon, but we also have to recognize that they're also unique. So in this collaborative focus strategy, that's what's king, is that we're really focused on identifying what those unique spots are and how we might meet families, especially in rural areas. We also have 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon that we work with. We also have other tribal partners that we work with from out-of-state tribes. So a lot of sector points to think about. And when the person speaking before spoke about who's not at the table and being sure to ask, I think that is such a platinum promising practice to really consider, is that you're always asking, did we think of everyone? Is there someone not here today? So I could always talk about collaboration. I love to throw a party. So moving on, so that we have time for, so I can hear from all of you, or if you have questions, is kind of some things that we've learned. And preschool development grant funds afforded us an opportunity to work with Portland State University to conduct a study, an evaluation study on what's happening around coordinated enrollment in Oregon. I do know that about 13 out of the 16 early learning hubs that we have participated in this evaluation. Families, providers, advisory groups were all consulted around this work and during this study. And a couple things. One, it's always fun to and important and valuable to celebrate the small wins and the milestones along the way. One is that Oregon continues to be a champion for stable and attached families. We're very committed to helping families be ready for kindergarten and ready for that education pathway. We're also committed to understanding and elevating parents as first teachers, reinforcing that they already have what it takes to do that work. I talk about the Vroom program, and I always speak that nobody signs up to be a bad mom or a bad dad. You walk into this with the best of intentions, and when you get these kind of resources and opportunities to learn and know more about your child and your family and yourself, things get sunnier. So that's always exciting to think about. So in that, I always want to celebrate that moment, that we are doing things as quick as trust and time allow us. So with that, we have been changing the enrollment documentation requirements, working with our partners at Department of Human Services to make it easier with benefit letters and other kinds of documentation, so that it's easier for folks to become eligible for Preschool Promise and other publicly funded programs, allowing hubs to create systems and application processes that are a little faster. We're still fine-tuning and tinkering, so that work is always in progress. As we kind of hear back from our partners, both providers and families, on what that looks like. A big win was putting these application forms and interest information on a website where they were available in different languages. That's always a commitment at the Department of Early Learning and Care. We are committed to 5 languages of most of our information that we are able to translate. I know that we work with other programs that have additional translation opportunities as well. So shout out to folks like Vroom, who have they're over 14 different languages now to help families 0 to 5. So nice plug for them. Also, respondents particularly like the fact that they were online. We talked about that in the different languages. Also, in some of our hubs, folks were able to go over those forms in person. They had family engagement sessions. They brought folks together and served food when they were able to, and help folks get that stuff filled out. Parents surveyed that they were, high satisfaction with the Preschool Promise program that their children were enrolled in. This also included other programs. I don't have statistics exactly in my brain right now about which, what those percentages were, but overall, very highly satisfied. So that's pretty exciting. Okay, with the good always comes like a little bit of salty, right? The sweet and the salty. COVID was the big one, where we've heard from our early learning hub partners that, hey, you kind of gave us this implementation plan and then COVID happened. So like, we've had staff changes, we've had life changes, we've had families move and come and go. Like, we might need a reset button on a couple things. So that's life. And we're kind of working and listening with our hubs and working with them to identify what those are. Procurement. In the last, when this evaluation was being conducted, you'll read where internal procurement, working with folks to get contracts out the door when people were strapped for staff capacity, really slowed things down in the state of Oregon and caused significant delays in some of our work, especially in this area. A lot of preschool development grant funding contracts were delayed as we were trying to get other Preschool Promise grants that we were trying to do the balance, and it just was a long haul. And as we see people coming back to work, staff increased capacities happening. So things are getting back on track. Contracts were going out on time this year, which was another what I call a huge milestone win. The application process timeliness. We need to think about internally, how do we ebb and flow to better suit families and their schedules. So we're having discussions internally about what that could look like. and what do we have, what's in our realm of opportunity right now? What can we do now? What could we do in the future to get to that sweet spot? So that's a conversation that internally leadership is just now starting to think about, given that we're a new agency and we have the opportunity to kind of build some promising practices and policies and procedures that would align and support that work. One thing that we heard about and that we continually hear about is resources. And it's mostly around capacity for staff, both internally and in community. It would be, I always say, dreamy if you had enough staff people in the field to work with families one-on-one in a fashion that made them feel comfortable. Making sure that translators were available, making sure that there was just enough of that for everyone, and giving them the quality time that they need to make sure they're making the right decision for their child as they enter preschool or childcare, infant childcare. The other thing is equity, always thinking about equity. Where are we showing up, making sure that families feel that this programming fits their needs, that it's culturally responsive, that it suits the desire. Some people want their children to be strictly Spanish speaking or culturally in their native language. Some want to mix, and just really honoring that choice and that desire and how you raise your child, and supporting that throughout the day while they're in preschool. One of the biggest needs, and I hear this a lot, and it's across other systems in early learning, is an aligned data system. What does that look like, and how can partners work together to create that? We all know that having something aligned like that would really reduce a lot of the weight. It would reduce a lot of the workload to try and determine eligibility, determine what other resources a family might need. If you're not eligible for one program, it would give you the green light for maybe something else that would support a family during that time of need or inquiry. So, those are the big rocks, I would say, of what our challenges are. They're nothing out of the norm. When you think about coordinated enrollment, when you think about how you're doing this work, where you're showing up, getting that buy-in. I really enjoyed the person before in the main session speaking about MOUs. We have one hub in South Coast, Oregon, that has a number of MOUs that works together, and they all represent each other. And it's a very, very aligned system down there, and they do a great job to serve their families. And so I know it's possible. I know it's a big lift. And a lot of it, though, is really on human-centered design. Like, who are we serving and how are we showing up for them? So that would be kind of the, I do talk fast. I apologize. I am always a little nervous to speak to a crowd, and that applies to Zoom too. So I think my mileage per hour goes up a little bit.
You did great. Well, I want to thank you. I definitely learned a lot during your presentation. I'm sure others have as well. And so we have about 15 minutes for folks to really pick Cass's brain or to offer up things that are happening in your own state that you might want to share. But we really hope you'll maximize this time for learning and understanding what Oregon did that can be applied in your own state. So with that, I just want to open it up for anyone who wants to either come off mute or add comments to the chat. Looks like Paula has a hand up. Paula, go ahead.
Sorry, I just accidentally. Go ahead. I think that's Deanna. But you're on mute, Deanna.
Oh, Deanna, we're still not hearing you. Oh, darn.
You can put it in the chat.
Yep, definitely use that. And while she does that, does anyone else have a question they want to kick us off with? We have a quiet crew today.
Right. I just noticed that I saw my colleague Mady on here. Hi, Mady. So nice to see you. And she's the baby promise goddess. So like hit her up if you have questions about that program for sure, because it's pretty amazing. Sustainability. Okay. Love your words of wisdom. How is Oregon looking at sustainability in programs for rural areas? Sustainability for preschools or what kind of sustainability? Like staffing? All the PDG work. Well, good question. As a matter of fact, you know, PDG funds are one-time funds, kind of, so to speak. And even though 3 years and then you add 2 years of COVID in there for rollover, it feels like we've had this money for a long time. And so getting to the end of the grant and knowing that you don't is always something of a, oh yeah, now what? But also knowing most of the people that had the activities, Oregon was one of the biggest applications with the most activities presented for project work that was awarded. And I actually had one of those projects, and one of the things in parent voice and family engagement that we've heard along the way, I'm sure that you have all heard this too, is most families are not very enchanted by the idea of a one and done. They really want investments that that sustain hope and give them that extra mile that they need to go to get across the finish line. And over at grantee conferences, meetings I've been to, that's the one strong thing that I've heard, is that please don't give us those programs where you just show up, you build a bunch of hope, and then you know, hook your trailer to the back of your car and you head out. So knowing that, for instance, in the parent education, parent leadership work, I can speak to that specific one right now as an example. I worked with Department of Human Services. I worked with the Oregon Parent Education Collaborative to think about, we have funds called the Student Success Act dollars, where an early learning account investments are made to support parent education as a strategy for parents. And so with those funds, where we identify priority populations and what those needs are around parenting ed, we work in tandem with the self-sufficiency programs of DHS. So in doing so, we were able to do a federal match with dollars, CHIP dollars, to be able to increase the OPEC budget and sustain some dollars that PDG had given. So much so that we were able to hire 2 community engagement folks to help with parent education and parent leadership in our 36 counties. So I put a gold star on that, not because it was my project, but because we worked across systems, universities, community partners, and both of them are bilingual. They're helping folks in communities elevate the awareness and importance of parent education. And we're also able to weave in, this is where that sustainability piece comes in, I suppose, is the parent leadership toolkit that is live on their website that also includes training. They have access to all of the parent education tools and resources. And as we learn more about parent leadership for Oregon and parent voice, and really working up that continuum to where parents are leaders, we can continue to evolve that website and that living toolkit. So that was one way that I personally took the assignment of how do we use these dollars to keep living, to do this project. So that's one example. In that too, there's also an early learning quality professional. It's called ELSI, I want to say. I always get the acronyms wrong. And Mady's shaking her head. Yes, I got it right. Thank you, Mady. Lifeline. Anyway, to help professionals with training around quality, we're also doing Spark. We're doing a Spark revamp where a lot of listening sessions and feedback sessions are coming in, and they're analyzing that data around what Spark could look like for Oregon, and how to really communicate that out to both families and providers. That sometimes Spark is a different path than, and really making sure that families understand, more importantly, about quality care first and foremost, and then deciding about some of those other components. So those are two examples. I'm sure that there's many more. Part of the PDG funding was helping us become DELC as an agency. We had a project management office. We had consultants, Marshall, A&M, Alvarez and Marshall, that really helped us create our agency, thinking about bringing over ERDC, a system like the employment-related daycare that had over 700 forms, I want to say, or something. I was on the project management group for that, and having to get all of those forms turned into DELC, get them moved over into the languages. They only have English and Spanish at the time. So thinking about that, just a lot of moving parts. So really working on, so in my mind, that's the ultimate sustainable project, because it really did bring us to where we are today and can help us grow into the future.
That was helpful. And for the coordinated enrollment work, were a lot of your big costs more the upfront infrastructure costs in terms of sustaining some of that work? Are the ongoing costs fairly minimal, and can those be absorbed by other funding sources? Or what does that look like for Oregon?
Right now, we're kind of just having that discussion, given that our PDG funding will end this by the end of this year. So kind of wondering, we know that in community that they need more resources to do this work well. Thinking about the capacity and the resources, that's one of them. Staff. To that note, though, I think that's probably about where we are in the conversation, is just starting it out before I know we have until, like around the beginning of the year before we start building those policy option packages and thinking about like what other additional components and things we might need to do this work. We're still in that learning phase, I would say, and really thinking about the direction that we want to take this overall.
All right, we have about 8 more minutes in our group if there's another question. Otherwise, I have a few. All right, maybe I'll jump in. So one of my questions, Cassandra, is you had talked about providing the application in multiple languages. When I was with a state, one of the challenges we had was then receiving those applications back and needing resources and capacity to translate them, because our data system, that information, in order for us to be able to analyze and work on it, had to be in English. So if someone's filling out an application in a preferred language, what does your process look like to then input that data into your system?
To my knowledge, I believe that they work with translators in their communities. We have a organization called IRCO, which is immigrant, refugee, something organization. I'm sorry for this. I can't remember the C. Anyway, they have multiple languages. They have home visitors. They have a lot of different staff and resources to help us. We have a couple folks on site. We have different contracts with translators to help us with that information. And so we do our best to support our hub partners as well, who also have bilingual speaking staff. I think that's been one of the best things that you could probably have, is that immediate, to where you don't have to worry about the downtime of translation. I also understand for new families that can also be a trust barrier, where you really would prefer to kind of, a lot of times it was verbal, where the people met with them and they filled out the application in English probably, and spoke to the people in Spanish, and created that relationship to be able to support them.
Thank you. Yeah, that can be such a barrier. And I think it's one that states, in my experience, it's difficult to overcome. So then you don't even go in the direction of offering multiple languages.
I think that speaks to being intentional about your rural and communities where you have populations that English is not their first language. We have a lot of refugee kind of communities around the state that are coming in, and languages that maybe wouldn't necessarily be one that is well known in that community. So really working with our partners to find out what other resources are available, so that that family can feel supported.
Yeah. I had another question, just left my head. So it comes back in the next minute or two. But I do want to open it up again for anyone else who has questions or wants to chime in. My question came back. So as you're exploring bringing in some of those other programs like SNAP, what are those conversations like in terms of eligibility criteria and how you're looking to align some of that, and maybe being thoughtful in terms of streamlining applications?
Well, we just became an agency on July 1, so I would say that I'm not quite sure at this point, like what this will gel up to look like. I think, like a bowl of, like you're gonna make Jello. I think the sugar is still dissolving in the water, but what I would think, would be right is really still communicating, like getting access to finding out, like if you're coordinating over here, what happens over there, and making sure of those unintended consequences that sometimes pop up, and really running those down, having the direct pay unit, having ERDC over in our unit, our agency will be closer to, to being able to recreate system or reimagine it, I would say. Having the self-sufficiency programs still at DHS, so TANF, SNAP, those types of WIC, those will still live at DHS. And we will continue to still be a partner with them and working in tandem to figure out what that looks like. We're looking at doing a pilot for, it's called the One System, to where some of our hub staff that's working on coordinated enrollment would be able to have screen access to some of that data to expedite some of that eligibility quandary that continues to kind of slow things down a little bit. We understand that that's a lag in time that we would like to help families with. So
thank you. Yet the shift to your new department seems to just be this like prime opportunity to take all those opportunities you've been thinking about and really, to your point, be able to reimagine the system, making it better for families. So it's a hard transition, but one that ripe with opportunity.
Yeah, and with the legislative support that we've had to this point, our early learning council, our community partners, really focusing on home visiting, really putting a heavy nod to that, expanding capacity so that more families can have home visiting, really using that as a strategy. I feel like really solidifies this work and the value add. So I'm excited to see what happens in the next few years around that too.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we can head back to the breakout room, but before we do, Cass, a last thought you want to leave us with? Not to put you on the spot.
You know what I would just say real quick is that I am so blessed to get to work with so many people that are passionate about this work across the nation. Like PDG is always a highlight for me because I love visiting with everyone, but it's pretty inspiring to hear other people not only doing the work, but hearing about their struggles, being vulnerable in the space to share what's been hard. What are those small wins? I think that's what keeps me going is just continually hearing about what people are seeing happen on the ground and families thriving in those spaces. So
Yeah.
that's it.
Thank you for your contribution today. Like I said before, incredibly valuable.